So we want to give people a bit of history and a bit of what this is going to actually look like, and of course what President Trump did.
We've known that tariffs are a tool that President Trump enjoys using to get other nations to fall in line. It is the prerogative of the United States government and of the executive to find ways within their power to try and use this as a negotiating tactic. We saw a very quick trade war with Colombia just a couple weeks ago where tariffs were announced and they immediately flipped after trying to bluster a little bit back. They caved and said, okay, we will take the migrants. But Professor Hutchison, this comes not with just a more smaller economy in South America. This is now with our direct neighbors. These are tariffs on both Mexico, Canada, and as well a blanket tariff on China. But give a little bit of background of what was proposed and why, and then we'll get into some of the moves that have already happened.
Absolutely. So it's important to note that both Mexico, Canada were warned on January the 20th that punitive tariffs would indeed be imposed on both countries if they did not help the United States stem the flow of fentanyl and other forms of trafficking. Neither country moved forward, at least expeditiously. And so last Saturday, President Trump did impose those tariffs to take effect, I believe, tomorrow. And many of those tariffs are very punitive. Now, those tariffs were designed to do one thing, to force those countries to come to the bargaining table, and they worked. And so one of the things that the American people have noted, I think, is that if you indeed have a backbone, people will react. In addition to Canada and Mexico, President Trump has imposed tariffs up to 10% at least on China, with more to come potentially on the European community. Keep in mind that Trump's threats of tariffs have worked with respect to Colombia, Panama, and Venezuela. Also, and this is the last point I'll make, you should note that President Trump imposed tariffs during his first term, and yet inflation came down and employment rose. So it's important to keep in mind that tariffs are not necessarily inflationary, contrary to what the Wall Street Journal is saying.
That's right. And I think if you're reading kind of the more mainstream media, what you'll see these days is the people freaking out, Logan, about what is this going to do to our economy? This is all of a sudden going to destroy everything. Yeah. I thought he cared about the price of eggs.
Tariffs has become a dirty word.
Right.
And it's something a lot of us have to get educated on. It's not like we all know everything about how this all works. As Professor Hutchison said, a lot of this is negotiating. This is a tactic to get people to the table to get it done. The difference is you actually have and we discussed this a little bit in our prep meeting, you have an administration that is working on overdrive right now. We are seeing mass movements and changes happening almost to the point of overwhelming the American people. Like I said, I have very conservative friends who were talking about President Trump, but they were like, this feels like a lot. Feels like a lot when you have those things happening. You have Netanyahu meeting today in Washington, D.C. A lot of this feels very frantic, but it's really not. You have J.D. Vance in East Palestine today, visit on the second year anniversary of that horrible train disaster, when for years you couldn't get the Biden administration to even show up. So it is this aggressive rethink of how the government works and that you can take these actions.
But Professor Hutchison, also, we've seen already, while the world and by the world, I mean the liberal media here in the United States, freaking out about these tariffs, the very left-wing president of Mexico has already announced just this morning, right before we went on air, that she and President Trump have agreed to a deal that will be a pause in this for 1 month. So Mexico's off the hook for a little bit, but they are going to work through an even more broad deal on security and trade with the United States. What happened there?
Well, that's a brilliant point. Mexico has announced that they will now send 10,000 members of their National Guard to the U.S. border. This will help stem the flow of two things, fentanyl and human trafficking. And I think there's more to come. Now I think the onus is on Justin Trudeau to reach a similar agreement. I suspect Justin Trudeau is in a weaker political position, and so we don't know whether that will push him to cave or whether or not he will stiffen his backbone because he doesn't have that much to lose. But his political party, the Liberal Party in Canada, has a lot to lose. Only 16% of the Canadian people support Justin Trudeau, partly because he's been such a horrible prime minister.
Yeah, and remember, he is in kind of political purgatory right now.
He's about to be gone.
Because he has resigned pending the new prime minister that will be happening at the end of next month. So,
I mean, I'm looking up right now, and I just looked up at the news that's on, and Secretary of State Rubio right now is in El Salvador speaking. Earlier was in Panama. This is a different Washington, D.C. This is a different America in the last 2 weeks. And you have someone like Schumer out there being like literally holding an avocado and a Corona and saying, this price is going to go up for the Super Bowl. Can you believe it? Do you think that's what the American people are worried about right now? This is the big issue. It's trivializing important issues and making it like, it reminds me a lot of the COVID times where it was like, let's trivialize this one moment. And you remember like, oh, delicious cheeseburgers and fries, or, it feels like those kind of moments where you feel like you're being talked down to as an American. Let's hear from Chuck Schumer.
Let's just take Super Bowl Sunday, okay? It's going to affect beer, okay? Most of it, Corona here, comes from Mexico. It's going to affect your guac, because what is guacamole made of? Avocados, both from Mexico.
Yeah, remember what he looked like grilling? Okay, we don't remember that. This is the guy telling you how to have your Super Bowl party. This is somebody who threw frozen patties. What was
right,
that?
Yeah, they were still frozen. And he put them on the grill
with cheese.
And they said it was his first time ever grilling.
He had never grilled, so he's going to grill you on what you're going to do. Super Bowl party is going to be, because Martin, your avocados, your guacamole is going to suffer. And sorry about your Corona. And of course, we saw what this really is, as Rick Grinnell said, as Professor Hutchinson said, we've said, which is these are negotiation tactics. And now Mexico's got a little bit of reprieve, and they're going to do what? Send 10,000 of their own troops to the border. They're going to help stop the flow of fentanyl into this country. This is a moment.
This entire issue around the tariffs on Mexico had to deal with is legitimate security for our border. This is something the Biden administration said only Congress could fix. But instead, the same party that was saying, you're concerned about your price of eggs, but he's going to ruin everyone's human rights, all of a sudden are now like, but what about your price of guacamole at your Super Bowl party? It's so disingenuous, especially because when you think about the real reason that now Mexico has conceded and is going to send 10,000 of their troops to the border to help, and that is compounded by our troops on the other side of the border trying to stop the flow of trafficked humans and fentanyl, which kills Americans every single day. I think you, Chuck Schumer, saying, what about your guac? It's a little disingenuous when you are so concerned about President Trump violating human rights. He's trying to save lives and the dignity of those trafficked by putting an end to it at the southern border. He used trade as a bully pulpit, as a stick. The carrot is, we won't do this, and Mexico, with their left-wing president, is now complying. This is a good thing for the world and for those that are disenfranchised by cartels.
But what about your avocado toast? What's going to happen to it? Your cost of brunch is going to go through the roof.